One of my taglines, I think, in my LinkedIn was, maintaining human interaction in a digital world.
What do you think you lose when you replace people?
Well, I think we lose our uniqueness. I think we lose our humanity, right?
Companies are being encouraged to essentially die or AI.
Doge ran up in the government. Me as a CISO or cybersecurity expert, I don't think we have privacy anymore. We've basically traded in our privacy, our humanness, a lot of it for convenience. You have to stay woke, my friends.
Welcome to Becoming Big Mama, the podcast where we talk about wisdom, culture, technology, and right now. Today, we have a fascinating guest that sits at the intersection of technology, security, and human well-being, Raum Sandoval. Raum is the founder of Flowchestra, an AI-powered business operating system that unites people, data, and tools into a cohesive, intelligent workflows. He has a strong background as the Chief Innovation and Technology and Security Officer, where he has integrated AI-driven security and IT infrastructure to deliver strategic outcomes. He's the perfect person to discuss how we can use technology and AI to talk about where we are now, where we are going with AI and security without losing our humanity. Welcome, Raum.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for that very nice bio and introduction. I appreciate it and looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. So I have been looking forward to this conversation because I feel that you have a certain level of both professional expertise, personal involvement, political opinion, and just like really all around kind of challenging and curating your perspectives on where we are right now. And so one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is, your passion for maintaining sort of human interaction and kind of staying in touch with the digital world while kind of dealing with a lot of these policies and changes, both in the cybersecurity world, the IT world, and also politically. Can you elaborate on what that looks like to kind of balance all those different sides of you, both in a business context and on a personal level?
Sure. Yeah. So for me, I've always said, like, one of my taglines, I think, in my LinkedIn was, maintaining human interaction in a digital world. And that's probably been in there for, some 15 or so years. And a lot has changed just in the last 2 or 3 years especially with the introduction and proliferation of AIs. We're seeing it happen real time and daily, these daily changes, right? So it's one of the things that I've always enjoyed doing or found myself doing was making connections for people, whether it was for business or like, hey, I know a guy, talk to this person. I've done several projects in the past where I found myself in industries that didn't really interest me per se, or like they weren't really they weren't in tech, for example. I think when I was in Chicago, had a Chicago nightlife little gig, but we were basically connecting people and almost started to create an app around, getting people to, find gigs and, the right type of gigs, whether it was bartending or catering and stuff like that. But just making those connections. And, as technology has evolved and as I've evolved, I've found myself finding my niche and finding ways to make those type of connections. And, that's just something that's kind of always been important to me. And, right now where we have AI at the forefront, everyone wants to use AI and, but you can't really completely replace people, you can, but I don't think it's in our best interest, nor does it bring that uniqueness, right, that we still have within ourselves.
I was going to say, what do you think you lose when you replace people? Because I do think that there are conversations around how close we can get to replacing people with technology while still kind of riding this line of risk. Like, what do you think we actually lose once we, kind of go over that line?
Well, I think we lose our uniqueness. I think we lose our humanity, right? Like, what are we actually doing this for? I mean, with technology, you could technically start a business in a box and everyone has a carbon copy of the same thing. But what sets us apart, right? And I think there's still, as humans, there's something that attracts us to certain types of things, whether, like certain types of humanness, right? Or whether, spirituality, or like, for example, going to, I have a friend, he was telling me, he was helping his wife start her own practice. She's a doctor. And it was a tech first practice, right? And they were building all the tech and making it really cool. But what she said and what stood out was that they were building it for to have it more intimate, right? Of like understanding. So it wasn't so even though it's still like prescriptions and things like that, and not the what do you call it when it's the more non-prescription I'm blanking out on the name, but like the holistic, alternative medicine. It's not that, but she would still, create these connections and actually understand her patients, right? And actually understand like a little bit about their life, what does it look like, as opposed to just, writing a prescription, but just being like, understand like what's actually going on. And just kind of, to me, that's like reimagining like healthcare, right? To have a little bit more context of, well, before I prescribe you an antidepressant, or before I prescribed you, whatever, let me just understand a little bit about what's going on in your life. Is it something that this is like constant, or is this something that's because there's something happening right now? And I think that's something that's very unique and that's very different. At the same time, she's introducing tech, creating how we can be more streamlined and make it so that you can log in and have all of these things, which I think is great. And I think that's what a lot of people are yearning for. Gen Z, like, don't listen to like to talk to people and things like that. But that's a good example for me of like that, again, maintaining that human connection, that human touch, and something that's unique that you can't get out of AI. Otherwise, we're just AI is just going to reproduce the same content over and over, and we're just going to be carbon copies. And then it's like, well, what's the meaning of life? Why are we even here? So
right. Well, that's interesting that you bring up this sort of parallel, comparison of like, medicine, something that you would think is very human centered to begin with, still has this split between like, big business, pharmaceuticals, like prescription, like, diagnose and move on, versus this more like intuitive kind of like psychosomatic, bridging into also like what is the actual medical need, right? Like a lot of times, folks will go to the doctor and say, I'm having palpitations, right? Heart palpitations. And then after kind of a little bit of discovery and exploration, they understand that actually you don't have what we would, kind of name as a disease or a condition, but rather it might be psychosomatic from things like stress or a change in your environment. And it's just as important for, those types of medical professionals to approach situations like, hey, there could be multiple truths. Yes, you're having palpitations, but you're also having, something that might be driven from something that's not necessarily biological, but more, psychological. So in this sort of comparison that you brought up, how do you do that though in tech? Like, I feel like that's where we're going to continue to see AI being used like it is right now, but that's not to say that that is the capabilities of AI. Like, one of the things I want to get into a little bit later, which we can jump into right now, is like, what does it look like to have Black AI? And there are people who are, kind of going off on that exploration of like, for like, how would that even be different than what we have now? And I think it gets back to what you said, which is around agenda. We're going to continue to see AI being used as a tool in service, almost in a labor sort of way, the way that we've been seeing it, than maybe what it could be on a more creative, on a more sort of like pairing between human and sort of like technology than what we see it right now. We see it very much like kind of like a servant in like a weird way, like do this for me, rather than how can it work with humanity to better humanity while also still kind of being technology, right? Like we don't want it to be human. We want it to kind of stay in its lane, but we also want that lane to assist.
Yeah.
It's kind of like lane assist, but a different way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So like right now, like for a lot of folks, I think for a lot of folks, like AI is still kind of mystic and not really sure what it is or how to use it, but I think in the mainstream, or what's becoming more mainstream, is Chat GPT, Perplexity, large language models, generative. Hey, y'all having a chat conversation and using it, kind of replacing it with Google, and even what we're seeing in businesses a lot, whether it's Microsoft Office 365 Copilot, or every little application has their own little AI. So like Salesforce, Einstein, I believe, right? And you sit there, chat, and have those type of conversations, and it's being marketed as like this Copilot, or I've seen people call give GPT a name, and it's like, that's my best friend, because they found a way to use it, and I think that's a very good start. I think that is a good way to use it for what's in front of us. Because it can help you be more productive. It can help get your creative juices flowing. If you're a small business, especially like, let's say somebody who's a graphic designer, you really have to, in my opinion, you have to change the way you work as a graphic designer. But how can you leverage AI to assist with that? What used to take a few days for, 5 to 6 conceptual designs by one person can really be done in 10 minutes with GPT. And for a graphic designer, that's something that you can have GPT build an application, get this information from the client, and then go from that, right? Help get their inspiration, build something out, like a different type of approach. I think this is great for what's in front of us, but I think thinking of AI as this Copilot, these big businesses, these corporations are not thinking about how to make a individual's life easier. Yes, that's obviously how we can use it, but they're thinking about how can we swallow businesses whole? How can we eliminate labor, right? So for us as consumers of the product, we have to start looking at corporations, big businesses as a risk to us, because they're figuring out how do we get rid of, our labor? How do we reduce our labor force? And I think even small, medium businesses are thinking, well, how can I make my business more productive? I think they're also thinking about how can I reduce my cost, which means typically means how can I reduce my labor, right? The business can also think, well, how can I increase my productivity to scale up, build my business, which I think is great.
So, kind of going deeper on that, like AI has become very ubiquitous. It's become pervasive. As you mentioned earlier, companies are being encouraged to essentially die or AI. And I just made that up. So, but it's basically get with it or, lose. And as someone who has such a rich background in, IT, cybersecurity, AI, where do you see the line between technology that's like smart and intelligent and one that's like invasive, right? Because essentially what you're talking about, even with the example of Flowchestra and some of these other sort of AI apps, is we want it to be integration should almost be an age-old word, because integration almost implies that they're not connected to begin with. But what you're talking about is let's connect all of these different things around your needs in one place. And I think when we think about invasive and this sort of idea about connection, there are people, like you said, who want certain parts of their lives to be, to remain private or to remain non-connected. But at the same time, everyone is being encouraged to be more smart, to be more intelligent, to incorporate AI. How do you use AI to kind of like, have that balance between, like smart and intelligent, but non-evasive without kind of giving up your autonomy?
Yeah, I think what we're building, is in context of business. It's voluntary. It's
Sure.
business data. With that said, for the product we're building, privacy laws, regulations, those are, in my opinion, would be beneficial to our business because we build in those type of things, thinking about privacy, thinking about, your data, thinking about securing data, not leaking data, being very, thoughtful and strict around where the data resides, and how it's being used and processed, whether it's with third parties and things like that. So taking into account, HIPAA laws, right? If there's healthcare information, so we're building that's built into the application itself as it should. However, I think that those privacy regulations, I think the privacy laws, so different state, it's different in different state. There's not anything at the national level. Like there's no AI regulation at the national level. They tried not to.
And there won't be.
And there probably won't be.
That's part of the big beautiful bill, is actually to relax a lot of, not to cut you off, but like I found that so surprising, is like not only are we, where we challenged was like, man, we need to, have policy at the pace of AI. And like, not only are we not going to have, like this effort, we're experiencing the opposite, which is for the next 5 to however many years, I think it's like 5 to 10 years, they actually did vote. They actually voted to, I think they actually cut it out after the big, beautiful, they actually cut the part out where they were trying to restrict states from creating their own regulations for the next 10 years. So I actually think that was removed. And so here's the thing. I actually agree that states shouldn't be regulating. However, I know that the federal government is not going to do any regulation, so the states is the next best thing. Right now, Colorado is, I believe, the only state that has AI regulation that's already passed. I think California was the next one working on it. And so I've talked to businesses, I've talked to enterprise, I've talked to banks, and their North Star is the EU AI regulations, right? And ISO 42001 just came out. So there's businesses and there's still, again, for whatever reason, whether it's ethics or, future regulation, they're taking those steps to make sure that it's just not the wild, wild west. But I've seen over the years, what I see is, some of these privacy laws being decimated. So the cost of a data breach, so whether, Facebook sells your information without your consent, or, XYZ company is breached and they lose your data, the cost of that it's just like, oh, well, we'll give everyone $1. But if you remember back when like the first Facebook breach, or Facebook, when they sold data, like, I don't know, it was like a $400 check for everyone. Granted, it was less people that were like aware and getting in on these class action lawsuits. But I think over time, they're really just, get rid of privacy laws, right? Because even we talk about Doge, for example. I mean, Doge ran up in the government. Me as a CISO or cybersecurity expert, understanding, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, that they went in there and destroyed the confidentiality, right? Because like, we don't know what happened with that data. And then you take the data and whether you process it with Grok or XAI or whatever, I mean, there was probably privacy laws being breached just in that alone, right? And who sees this information? So all of these things, well, how do you not get in trouble for that? Well, you just get rid of the laws, right? And I just see that being more of a pattern. And you see now you have Palantir in these in the government, deeply in the government, and OpenAI now deeply in the XAI, like they're all having government contracts. And so in order to really take advantage of all that data, you have to sacrifice privacy. And so I don't think we have privacy anymore. I would assume that anything you're using, technology, just assume that it's being data mined. And they've been doing that forever, whether you've been signing that consent, because most people, they just sign it and you've given it away, or if they just do it illegally or accidentally, it doesn't matter, right? And we, as the people, if we're not holding people accountable, holding our governments accountable, then no one will. And I don't think people really understand, the average person doesn't really understand what they're signing away or what they're actually doing to fight back, right? And that's part of the problem. So I don't see that going away. That's gone. Like that time period is gone. So we have to assume that they're using our data and that we don't have really a right to privacy anymore, even though on paper we still do, supposedly. So I'm gonna circle back around to this sort of idea about like how do we fight back? Because I feel that I think that there's more opportunity for folks to play the same game than they realize, but we'll get to that in a sec because I would love to get your feedback. But kind of just talking a little bit about your journey into like from some of these corporate companies that you worked for into more entrepreneurship and consulting. How did you? Because it sounds like I said, you have a lot of value-based sort of actions throughout your different spheres of your life, socially, as well as professionally. What piece of wisdom kind of motivated you through your like journey, going from corporate to entrepreneurship, and who kind of gave you that like wise advice? Like, where did it come from?
I just had a conversation like 2 days ago. It was super relevant. I think for me, and it actually, I was at a friend, that I was with on Thursday, and he had brought over he invited one of his colleagues over to his house. He's about 10 years younger than us. And I hear him, he's dropping wisdom on him. He's like, here's why I brought you here. No one comes to my house. Like, and I'm like, man, you're lucky, here you are in your 20s. You have, my guy right here dropping all this wisdom, and I'm obviously sitting there sharing a little bit of mine. And I said, man, I wish I had somebody in my 20s that was really like, a better mentor. And my friend said, yeah, you had haters. And I was like, I had a hater, like a boss. Yes, true. But I also had people that like, they also didn't know what they didn't know. Right. So even though they had, a lot, they had wisdom, and they helped me, get to the next level, especially from like a techno aspect. So for me, it was a lot of just, finding a way. I had a boss who was a narcissist and combative, but I also feel like, and probably would you consider like verbally abusive at the time. And so like I didn't. I also consider like, okay, I went to the school of hard knocks, so I can, face a lot of adversity in business, and every time I like see adversity, it's just like is nothing to me now. But it was a toxic environment. But I also like was the type of person that I didn't like just sit there and take it. I just dished it. I was like, look, you're not going to sit here and lie on me. Here's the facts, right? Which has been helpful for me. But I also went through a long, like I wouldn't say like a long period, but there was definitely periods of self-doubt, right? Like, like, I don't know, cybersecurity, this isn't for me. And then I didn't, I had a mentor, my predecessor, he said, you should do it. And I was like, he had to nudge me a little bit. And then once I did it, I was like, why wasn't I doing this sooner, and those type of things. And so, when somebody's presenting an opportunity and, they're putting that in front of you, I would say take it, because they're bringing it to you for a reason, right? And this young man, he was sitting next to me, and my friend's telling him, and he's like, he's like, are you going to do it? Are you going to do this program at the company? And I don't know, man. And I'm like, look, he's telling you for a reason. So what's the worst that can happen? You fail the first time. Right. So, I think that those things, and especially like, when I went to my last company that I was at, I looked at the website, and I said, this is a mighty white company, like white men. Yeah. And it was a little like, for lack of a better term, intimidating. And I don't know if I want to be in a diverse environment. And, I got there, and my being there and the people I knew, the connections I had, it became a more diverse organization, but it was also a woman-owned organization. Eventually had a woman president, and we had a very diverse leadership team. And, it's just those certain steps, like just at some point in the last few years, I just stopped being as modest. I was always like too afraid of being too cocky or overconfident. I think there is a certain confidence that you need to have. And if you can kind of blast through that self-doubt, then, I think that you can think, start thinking the world is yours. Start thinking you belong in these places. Start thinking you can actually create the next unicorn product. what's the worst that can happen? You think you create a unicorn product and you create $1 billion, like, tens of $1 million product, right? Great. Like, that's not a failure. You just,
For a man to be in a, space maybe where you are a minority or you are in leadership, which is very rarely, right? But like, you're in a leadership position where there are maybe more women than men, or it's a woman-led company, or it's a different dynamic. To find that confidence that you feel steadfast in without having to wonder, oh, did I just make someone else feel some type of way just for me being myself? And I feel like this is really, really challenging even today, where there are so many men, young men, boys who are having trouble finding their own way to wisdom and finding their own way to confidence because of maybe like popular, and this is not to say that it's wrong because there's a history here, but like popular topics like, well, mansplaining, or popular opinions like, being in a room where there's less women than men should be more aware of that. And, like, I don't want to say temper or constrict, but like almost like watch yourself or make room for others. And I think that it takes a certain type of person to navigate those spaces, but it definitely takes a certain type of man to emerge still confident and self-assured, but at the same time balanced and like, not like just the right man for the moment. Like I've been reading this book that's called like I think it's actually called like the man for the moment, or the man of the right moment. But there's this guy, and he's been talking about like, as a person, you should have a tool set where you can pull from but a diverse set of versions of yourself, and find the way to be the right man for the right moment. And I would even, extend that to say the right woman for the right moment as well. But tell me a little bit about like your sort of journey around figuring out your own wisdom, like what you actually rely on in this moment, at this part in your life.
Yeah, I think what's super relevant is this whole DEI and diversity, right? But for me, my upbringing was in a diverse number of environments. As when I was young, lived in Chicago, went to all black school, went to a school, but I also went to a Chicago public school they were teaching French, Japanese, and Spanish. They had computers. I lived in, diverse areas with Hispanic, Black, and white. Went to an all-white high school. When I decided what college I wanted to go to, specifically, I wanted to go to a college that was diverse and more reflective of the population, right? And so like diversity has always been something that's important to me being, half Black, half Mexican, or African-American and Mexican-American, right? And so that's just kind of that's always been my world outlook. And I think that there's a lot of power in that. I've enlightened a lot of folks who weren't around, Black folks much, or Hispanic, whatever folks much, and ran into a lot of ignorance, right? But
even between those two groups, exactly.
So I mean,
on both sides,
exactly. Yeah. So, and I've caught all kinds of strays and all kinds of direct things, and but for me, like it's always been important to me. So like I said, before I joined my most previous company, I mean, I looked at the website and was like, damn, is this somewhere I want to be? But even when we were in IT, I knew that there was a lack of Black folks or people of color. There was a lack of women, and continues to be, right? So, I created the DEI charter, and I had a talent team. Like, and we weren't just like, oh, we got to fill a quota. Like, that wasn't what DEI is. I think a lot of businesses actually truly didn't know what DEI is.
Yeah.
But, we would look in places where that wasn't typical, right? We would look in, or even in my networks, right? Just naturally, right? I had like 6 people I brought into the company, right? And so we had a cybersecurity team that was a majority minority for a while, between women, people of color. It was like, how many companies have that? The company I'm consulting for doesn't have that, that type of diversity, right? So there's that. It just kind of but I do think that a lot of my wisdom, and how my outlooks and things come from my diverse background in a lot of different ways that takes place. The other thing I would say is, I've continued to just mentor the folks. And when I see somebody who wants my job, so to speak, like, I don't look at it as a threat. I'm like, look at it as like, okay, I'm going to elevate this person so they can take my job, because I feel like I'm going to move on to the next. And I think a lot of people are, like, there's this whole lot of like, wait your turn type thing in a lot of areas. Like, you're the oldest person, it's your turn, especially in like politics. But like, these 20-year-olds are smart. There's people I've come across that are smarter than me, and whether it's technical or they have business acumen, all right, let me help mentor this person so they can get up to speed on the business side or get up to speed on the technical side, because I see the aptitude, right? Let me help elevate you, right? Mm-hmm. Now I'm not gonna hold you back. Like, yeah, you probably gonna make twice as much money as I made or 5 years earlier, whatever it may be. Like, I'm not going to hold you. I'm not going to be the gatekeeper to hold you back. I'm going to be the person to elevate you, to help you see the things that you're missing, help you see the blind spots. Right. So, that's what I do the wisdom I give, but I'm also.
Why do you think more people don't do that? I mean, other than obviously fear.
Yeah.
Like, is it because there's nothing that like benefits them, or are they looking at it wrong?
I think that some people are very comfortable in their mediocrity, right? And it's a threat when there's somebody who may be better than them, especially if they're younger. I have a friend he started, and he's younger than one of the people that was supposed to be on his team. He said, you're younger. I'm not reporting to you. I know more than you. And I looked at this guy's LinkedIn and I was like, he needs to be fired. Like, because it's like it don't even match. You know what I mean? Yeah. But yeah, I think some people need to maybe dial down their confidence, right? Like, there's some people, and to that point, like, but to be able to have you need to have a strong manager or mentor, like, to tell that person, like, hold on, like, you actually don't know what you don't know. Like, you need to take that down a notch, things like that. So I think it's important to have like good mentors, good leaders in a company to be able to tell people like that. But for myself, like, I continue to consider myself, like, I can have moments of vulnerability with my friends because I don't have I don't have infinite wisdom and know everything, right? But can take constructive criticism, can help if there's somebody that can tell me my blind spots, whether it's a therapist, whether it's my friend. There's a lot of value in that. I'm open to that. Like, I'm not going to sit there and take offense. I mean, I can, and I might in the moment, right? But I'll go back and like reflect on it. Like, no, I appreciate you, you saying this or telling me, like, matter of fact, I wish you told me sooner. Because I think a lot of people assume that sometimes they want you to have this like, this just knowing, like, you should know me so well. And then even in relationships, and my wife went through this too. Like, oh, you should just know how I feel. Sometimes, no, you actually need to explicitly say these things, because you're telling me this. I literally had no clue until you said it, right? That you're thinking I thought some type of way, and oh man, like this, that, and other people are over there sitting there stewing about something that this person literally has no idea of, right? And so that goes in a lot of different, that applies in a lot of different ways, but stuff like that.
So when you started listening to all those 90 shows, literally, I've been present, but at the back, in the back of my mind, I'm listening to everywhere you go.
Yeah,
everywhere
exactly.
you I'm like, oh my God, turn off. I'm trying to listen to this man. But no, there is something. There's something I think about wisdom being more than just like the passive, like, oh, the quote on Instagram, and being more active and like its connection to community or its connection to, people, and almost something what you kind of illuminated for me is that community isn't necessarily about physical proximity, but rather the proximity to a connection. Like, and what I almost mean by that is like the habit building. Cause like we still have friends in Chicago, me being out in, California, you being in North Carolina, but we create habits still that allow us to feel like they're just next door or that they have some sort of proximal nature to us emotionally. And my next question actually comes around like, do you think AI can be wise, or is it just these quotes?
I think this is an area where it's so like if think about it, and I pose this question to my therapist a year or two ago because I was like very meta philosophical about AI, but like I said, if there's a person in a community, and let's say an underserved community who didn't have access to therapy or a therapist, and if you as a therapist could leverage technology to deliver that to a wider group, to a group that normally wouldn't have access to therapy at all, would you do it? And ethically, like even from a human aspect, like it kind of feels like trash, right? Like you shouldn't. But on the opposite side, like the alternative is nothing, potentially, right? And so I said, well, what about if you didn't eliminate the human aspect, right? But because you leverage AI, there still can be a human aspect, and you can actually deliver it to folks that normally wouldn't be able to. And I think those are the questions that like we should ask, right? Because I think when AI first, when ChatGPT first became a big thing, there was a company out there that was leveraging AI to deliver mental health services without telling them, which is, to me, like, that's effed up, right? Because like you're not telling them. However, I've tried it. I've kicked the tires to see just like, okay, here's what I'm like going through, like, okay. Yeah, that's pretty good. Like, that's a pretty good answer. Like, yeah. So, the technology's there. Should we use it? Yes. But like, again, how you can't eliminate humans. And sometimes in some contexts, there is a better answer, or recycled answers aren't necessarily the bad thing, right? There's a lot more we can relate. There's a lot of things that go through the same stuff. We're not necessarily as unique as we think. That's why therapists feel like they can map it to certain behaviors and things like that. And so but again, this is technology that exists. It's at our fingertips, and that it gives access to do things that we normally wouldn't have been able to do before. And should we take advantage? And I think the answer is yes. I have a podcast that there's no way in the world I'd be able to maintain the way that we've done 47 episodes since December. There's no way I would have been able to do it without the help of AI, because whether it's for the marketing, social media, helping tie up our agenda, helping identify like some new, specific sources or clips. Even we use Opus Clip, for example. Like it's an app that creates the clip that identifies, viral or important clips. All of that, right, is and it's really just changed. Like that would have been 4 or 5 people, but we're not doing it for profit, right? I would have never been able to pay 4 to 5 people to begin with, right? And so those are the type of things that we, can and probably should take advantage of in different ways. But also as like art, as an art form, like I don't want to have art generated by AI all the time, but I found AI creating logos that were beyond my wildest dreams. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a great logo. And that's happened twice now. Even I created like a concept, and I went to a graphic designer, and I ended up with the one that I said that I started with. I paid him to finish the job. But those are things like, how we don't want to replace art with AI generated crap, but damn, it understands me the way better than like another person could. And so how do we change that to shift like just how we do business or with one another, how we interact with one another? So
before kind of shifting to my last sort of question for you, as I've been really thinking about, and maybe I've been thinking a bit meta about it as well with wisdom, I'm kind of like, can AI be wise? And one of the first things I think about is, well, maybe when it becomes sentient. But then I think about, well, if it's trained on human data, and is that any different from me hearing a piece of wisdom from my grandmother and passing it along at the right time to the right person? That might be, a girl that I'm mentoring or volunteering with. Like, it wasn't that I created that. And so it's like, if AI is doing essentially that, can it be wise? And then my third sort of like question in that is like, well, are animals wise? Are non sort of like human beings, do we have examples of them exhibiting wisdom? And then this gets back to, again, well, how are we defining wisdom? Because you could say that environmentally, survivalistically, there are animals who have adapted, and that adaptation has revealed a sense of wisdom, evolution, from an evolution base where now they live amongst humans, and maybe bears don't, go toward certain human things, but that wasn't necessarily innate within them. That was, learned over time. And that's maybe a form of wisdom that a mother bear might teach a baby bear, right? Like these are the,
I think, to your point, like, we have to define wisdom, and I think that AI, and it depends how it's trained. It depends on the data. If the Grok's wisdom versus like ChatGPT's wisdom is probably two vastly different things. Something that's trained on the entire internet versus something that's trained with more verifiable sources. But even still, we talk about the bias and whatever. So you're going to get a different answer from each platform. It might drop some knowledge, but I don't know if I would call it wisdom. I think it does matter who it comes from, right? Because even us and, as an African-American example, for example, generational wisdom based off of actual lived experiences, whether it's from, my parents, or from my grandparents, or from what my ancestors and, what they went through. And I think that comes through in a way that isn't really something that can be passed on through AI in a way that that human connection, right? Me and my friend were sitting down, and it was something about, being in the same room and, just and sitting on a porch and drinking a tequila, and that as opposed to being at a bar or on the phone. You share something with me, and and we, even though we chat on like text message, this was something that happened months ago, and I was like, oh, see, that's why you got to have that face-to-face conversation, right? And you drop that, drop that wisdom. And I don't think that can really be recreated over the internet. I don't think it can be recreated. I have remote therapy, but still, like, you have to have these, like, it has to be like you have to build a place for it. You know what I'm saying? And I think some people have those relationships. They can pick up the phone and have that, drop that wisdom or whatever, or get on a Zoom, like where we're at now, get on a Zoom, but you have to be more intentional about it, as opposed to like, being around folks like that. Those type of interactions typically happen more, coincidentally or by accident. But I think that those can also there's a lot of value in that too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm just going to say my last little bit on that, because it sounds like we're trying to tease out what is wisdom, but there's something that you said that was like, well, maybe it's just based off of species. Maybe AI versus human, that's cross species, can't happen. Maybe animals versus humans, cross species can't happen. But there's something about the human to human or the humanity
human to human
in the words.
Yeah. And because, I mean, animals, like you said, can teach us, they could teach us something a little bit, but
they do.
I'm sure they teach it. I'm sure animals, they do. Absolutely, they do. They're intelligent beings too, right? So, yeah.
Okay. All right. So last sort of topic before we wrap up is I wanted to talk about this idea that you mentioned earlier, which is, how do people get involved? So, this idea of like, how do we fight back when, our rights to privacy have eroded? There's this general feeling that people, I think, have of it's going to happen anyway. It's already happening anyway. Nothing I can do to stop it anyway. Right. You see where I'm going with this. Mm-hmm. But I do think that there are things that people can do to fight back. And expanding what I mean by fight back, I mean put themselves in a position to negotiate the terms, right? Like if it's going to happen anyways, fine. There's a contract on the tables. It needs to be signed, but we can negotiate the terms. AI is here. Technology is here. The fourth industrial revolution is here, but we can negotiate the terms. And I think a lot of people, to your point, have not started negotiating the terms. Now, when we talk about data, there's this common conversation of they have our data and from that, there's nothing we can do about it. How do we get it back? But, and this is kind of, I use the reference or the sort of metaphor of like basketball, right? Like before Black people, got involved in basketball was very up and down, bounce the ball, stop, pass. Like it was very like structured until we got in there with some swag. And now we've kind of changed the game where everybody's doing what we, kind of innovated and invented. So in that same regard, there's this aspect, I think, of, okay, they have our data. And to some extent, we can't get it back or they have it. But don't we also have their data? Don't we also have access to each other's data? If we want to play this data game, how do we take it from our understanding of this to, okay, fine, let's change the game. And here's the thing. If you want to move employees out of companies and replace them with AI, robotics, whatever over time, those knowledge workers, those people who had access to company data, while it might be illegal, and I'm not suggesting that people download a bunch of company data, even though that does happen. But understand that you're not just being taken from, you also have information about these companies. You have information about how these things work. And though it may not be their EIN number or, their like tax ID or whatever it might be, something that you think is equally as sensitive to, as your social security number. You need to start thinking about the information that you do have. And I'm not saying weaponize it, but by not saying weaponize it, I'm actually saying maybe something along those terms, but become a threat. Just like you might feel that data is being used against you, what data do you have? How can you position yourself to like, and not even just like, okay, I want to take company data and utilize it. No, I'm like, again, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we have to get creative. And first and foremost, we have to get out of the mindset that we don't have anything or that we can't play the same game.
Right.
So I know that that's not really a question, but I'm curious to know where you see the opportunities that people might have that maybe are uninvestigated, unexplored.
I think to be honest, I think that's the type of thing that's, a call to action, right? I think there's people that have, they're subject matter experts in specific fields, or they have experiences in fields that they can come up, start to think about those answers. I think one of the quotes that is a recent quote, it's really basic, but instead of thinking outside the box, like get rid of the box. Deepak Chopra, right? I think it's great because, like I said, there's certain things that's happening. AI is going to happen. This government, some would argue, is going to, like, it's the fall of an empire. We're in an authoritarian regime. So, these things are going to happen. And let's imagine for a second that the Constitution went away for whatever reason. Well, what is beyond that? Like, what does the world look like that we as people want to live in? Not thinking about Democrat, not thinking about Republican, or like what we're used to. Like, what is actually relevant to us in the time that we live in, as opposed to this 250-year-old document that has been litigated and weighed upon the Supreme Court, like, and interpreted by the Supreme Court, when it's like, black folks weren't even people. Women weren't, like, really considered people. Like, black folks were property. Guns were a musket. Like, those things aren't relevant. So, like, what do we actually recreate when the dust settles? Like, because we as the people have power. And the reason why data is so valuable is because it's used to sell to us as consumers. We're the consumers constantly, buying, consuming all of this, what's being put in front of us, whether it's looking at the Instagram, so one way we could regain our power is actually, and I don't know if everyone's ready to do it, because the convenience is nice, right? And that's the thing.
Say it.
But we've basically traded in our privacy, our humanness, a lot of it, for convenience. And that's something we have to think about as people, because we make the data valuable, right? And they do it. It's to be predictive. It's to take away our uniqueness. It's very robotic. It's very much, again, like I said, I don't think that humans aren't as unique as they like to think. So, but when we get past this, like, what's left after humanity, right, is the next evolution AI and robots, like, who have they don't have a spiritual, North Star, like, what is their being, so I'm sorry, I'm getting, like, all meta and philosophical, but
this is on topic for the podcast.
but if we actually want to survive as humans, we have to start thinking about things in a little bit of a different, or in a significantly different way.
Yeah. Yep.
And I don't have the answer. And I think is, again, like a call to action of, like, think really big, think of, like, if we've lived in this time of keeping order, and as Americans, for us and for our generation especially, I feel like we've grown up in a pretty good time to be alive. Like,
it's an extraordinary time. Yeah.
And, a rare time, really, right? If you look at the history of times, especially when you're an empire. But also, I don't think it's a fall of an empire is not a bad thing. Like, when you look at some of the stuff we've done, but, like, so now that it's falling, and it will fail, eventually it all fails, right? That's inevitable. But, like, what does it look like after that? And I think that's where I find solace. Like, it's like, I feel like I will have more control than in this moment. So, but that's going to take a collective. The power's with the people, as long as the people know it, right? And so, like, as long as the people know it, as long as we have to wake up some people. Like, so we have to stay woke, my friends. I know it's like a bad to be woke for a lot of folks, but you got to be aware of what's going on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Raum, for joining us for this. We covered a lot of breadth and a lot of depth on, topics around, AI and, how to even use the data to drive a better, middle class, via, small and medium businesses and what they're needing in this time, but also just commenting on, like, wisdom and culture and just kind of where we are as a people. I've really appreciated just, going deep, going wide, going intelligently on a lot of these topics. And it was great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I love the whole concept of your podcast and this conversation. Lot to take away from it as well. And, maybe we'll do it again, and maybe come join us on our Radical Roots podcast.
For sure. I would love to. I need to brush up a little bit on my, political, kind of topics. But when it comes to history, because, one of the things I've been reading is the people's history of the United States, and reading that during this time of seeing everything that's been changing. Man, I'm telling you, it's kind of like, it's a little bit eerie. So I would love to join you guys on that podcast. And everything's bringing more history.
Everything's political, right? And that's the thing that people don't understand.
Everything's political as long as you're alive.
Exactly. So, all right, I enjoyed it.
All right. Okay.